This podcast has been produced in partnership between Diverse Learners and the Workforce Disability Equality Standard team to explore the lived experiences of disabled staff working in the NHS. Hello everybody, here is another instalment of the podcast series A Conversation With. And we're with another NHS employee today who's going to tell them all about their experiences in the NHS as a member of staff who has a disability. This is brought to you in partnership with Diverse Learners and the Workforce Disability Equality Standard. So, Inayah, hello, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
I understand you just had your COVID injection.
Yes, I did yesterday.
How are you feeling?
Joyful, a little bit achy, but better than having COVID.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we'll bear that in mind. So if you have a mind fog moment or anything like that, just let us know.
Yeah, we'll just blame it on the vaccine.
Or just blame rather than things that might come up in the conversation for in future. Right, okay, with that, let's get started and let everybody know why we're having a little laugh there. So number one is our question, and it's, could you tell us who you are, what your job in the NHS is, and how you would describe your disability?
So I'm Inayah Abdullah. I work for the NHS. I am now a qualified nurse associate. I started in the NHS just over 5 years ago. I started as a band 2 healthcare assistant, then worked on to a band 3, and then got the apprenticeship to do the trainee nurse associate, which I qualified in June 18. And I have just literally applied and APEL'd onto the student nurse. So now I'm working as an NA part-time alongside doing a full-time APEL for 18 months to be a student nurse to become a qualified nurse.
Wow, what a success story. So you might just want to explain to people what APEL is and what trust has supported you to do that, because that's amazing.
Yes, so we got the choice via our trust on an apprenticeship wage if we wanted to, or we could go ahead and do that self-funded. I chose a self-funded route just for personal circumstances, but APEL is basically the course that I did as an NA is basically 18 months of the pre-reg nursing. So I was able to use all of the material I've done and all of my grades and jump into halfway through the second year. So I'm starting at years 1.5 and I just literally need to do the remaining 6 months of the year 2 and then I start third year in September.
Fantastic. So you started as a nurse associate and did the apprenticeship. What you did on that course was directly correlated to the nursing course, and therefore you've gone into year 1.5 rather than starting right at the beginning. So you're halfway through your nursing course having done the apprenticeship nursing associate.
Yes, that's right.
Brilliant. Well, that actually helps maybe to explain people where nursing associate sits between HCA and nursing as well, because I know there's been like this band 4 area has been a bit of a confusion for some people. That's a really interesting self-development.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad that I did it the way I did it, because I've been able to get the experience of full-time 2 years hands-on and then get some insight into understanding the responsibilities of a nurse, as well as performing clinical skills and doing certain medications under supervision. And it's given me, I feel like, more experience so that I feel comfortable for the next stage.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that's got anything to do with your disability going through this slightly different route. So if you want to tell the listeners what disability you have, or disabilities you have, or how you would refer to them, and potentially how that might have had an impact on the way that you've learned and the way that you've got to the nursing course.
Yes, so I was diagnosed with dyslexia in my second year of university, the first time I went when I was 19, and it was only picked up by a tutor right at the end, and he just asked me, have I ever been tested for anything, because he understood what I was saying, but all of my work was kind of back to front and it was kind of jiggled around. So he said he understood what I was trying to get at, but at the same time I was kind of going a really long way around it. So at the time I said no, I'd not. So I got tested and they told me I had dyslexia, which was quite disheartening at the time, because I'd gone through school struggling and then I'd gone literally scraping the grades in that degree, or having to resit almost everything I did. And then it was kind of like half of the mark was already there. So then I only really had a year to kind of improve and just scrape through that degree. So
what was that degree in, Inayah?
it was in sports development and coaching.
Ah,
So I did graduate, but I didn't end up doing anything in that role. I just, at the time, it was my part-time job that I went full-time in, customer services, insurance. So kind of just went that way.
so you say you were 19 when it was flagged up. So how old are you now? You don't mind sharing that?
I'm almost 32. Next week is my birthday. And I found that since having the diagnosis and then using it in work purposes to get where I am now, just to have that understanding, it's made it a lot easier, because it's almost like people understand that not everybody learns one way. And it's like being told, as say, for instance, we're explaining something and I'm like, no, don't get it. Can you explain it another way? And as soon as they explain it in like a different way, it's stuck. And it's actually, sometimes I find it a positive, because there'll be certain ways I've asked a question, it sticks in my head, and there might be somebody that could be sat there and not remember what I can remember. So
Yep.
it's not always a negative thing. It's just obviously a different way of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of brings us melding into question 2, which is, what are your experiences of working in the NHS? So you've mentioned a couple of them already. So what are your experience of working in the NHS as somebody who has dyslexia and the route that you've come through?
So I'd say when I first ever started as a band 2, I didn't really see any negative points, as in it was very a physical job. Paperwork was very bare minimum as a band 2. So it wasn't ever a struggle. It was just a case of, as soon as I got something, I'd say the positive side of my disability is, if you show me something physical, then I've got it. But it's the academic side is where I just might need that little bit more, or a different way to learn.
A
So
little bit
as
more time maybe too?
yeah, I would say time, just to kind of understand. And sometimes I'd say time from the person teaching, because sometimes it can be a case of someone will explain something to you and they don't give you that minute to say, okay, hold on a minute, can I just relate back to you that I interpret the way you've told me as this? So just having that few minutes, it really does help.
Well, that's, sorry to interrupt, but that's really interesting, because that's then going on to question 5. But question 5 is about what experiences or insights or advice you might give to managers. So one of your pieces of advice would be actually to give people that little bit more time to ask questions, and to maybe explain things in a different way than they're used to.
Yes.
In order to meet your needs. So for the listeners, this is a very common thing if you have dyslexia or dyspraxia or ADHD or autism, which comes under the heading neurodiversity, or specific learning differences or specific learning difficulties, depending on where you are and how you like to name your own disability. But this jumping around and ideas connecting to each other is also something that is very common, as for me, definitely as a person who has attention deficit disorder and dyspraxia, most definitely something with the people I support in dyslexia. But again, that's really great, because in healthcare, there's a holistic approach that we take, and that jumping around and being able to see all these different connections is also very beneficial. So we're kind of jumping all over the questions in this podcast, but that's the joy of having a neurodiverse profile, and
Yes.
this is why we're different, and this
Yes.
is why we're asking for things to be done differently or explained slightly differently.
Exactly.
Excellent, excellent. So have you formally told anybody at work that you have a disability? Often that's referred to as disclosure. I don't know if you know that term.
Yeah, personally, I have. My manager is aware, and quite a lot of the nurses that I work alongside. I would say it's more of, it becomes within the gallow banter. I'm quite open about it. I'm not ashamed to say, sometimes I'll say that's just me being dyslexic. It's not in a case of saying it in like a negative way, or I might say something and someone might be like, well, how do you remember that information? Well, it's just how my brain works. So for me personally, on my ward, everybody knows that we might have a little bit of a joke sometimes, or I might say, listen, if you want me to do it, can I set it up in this way, or can I do this? And then some of my friends at work, they'll say, oh, go on, get your neurodiverse way in. And it's just a case of, they know that if they're going to give me something, not only do they know that I'm going to do it the way I need to do it for it to be done, they know that if they ask me to do it, it doesn't need to be second checked. it can kind of be, all right, I know you've done it, you've said you've done it, and I know it's going to be done to a good standard, which is a very positive thing that I always get from my manager. She always talks about my work and how my work's done, and it's always a bit perfectionist.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that perfectionist, when you look at a profile of somebody who has dyslexia or dyspraxia or a neurodiverse profile, often they'll ask you about perfectionism, and that is often a trait, which is a positive characteristic in the healthcare settings that we work for. So again, we've gone a little bit into question 5 again, which is excellent. So therefore, that advice to managers would be to praise and accept a different way of working, because it actually might be very beneficial. And also to recognize that your strengths may be in a different place. So you might bring a different set of skills, but you also might need support with different sets of skills or knowledge.
I think that's definitely related to change as well. I know that a lot of people don't like change. Obviously, we're in the 21st century. Not everybody learns the same way. And just because somebody doesn't learn a certain way, it was always kind of looked down upon, as in, if a certain person doesn't learn a certain way and they switch off, you need to find a way to bring everybody back to the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. Diversity, and this is where the diversity and inclusion element comes in. These diverse brains with diverse ideas and different ways of thinking is how we find solutions, how we find medicines, new surgical procedures, these innovators. If we didn't support them and think about, I hadn't thought about that differently. So, for example, supported people for the last 10 years via Skype on other voice and video platforms. And it's been a very hard slog. Sometimes people go, I don't like that way. Isn't that weird? And I don't, is that as good? And all of these kind of things. And I had quite a bit of bullying from my professional body even. But what's happened is, like, during COVID, within 3 weeks, we were all mobilized onto MS Teams. And these are the trusts that have been going, oh no, we couldn't possibly do that. It's no, far too difficult. And then within 3 weeks, because of a pandemic situation. And a lot of people are saying, I don't think I want to go back to the way I used to work. So have you had any experiences like that? So what we're doing now would be classed as a reasonable adjustment to be able to maybe work at home a couple of days a week, or maybe do some of the paperwork or have meetings virtually rather than having to come in if you've got a physical or mental health or neurodiverse profile. Traveling in and finding places can be very demanding. So this would be a reasonable adjustment under the Equality Act. And I just wondered if you got any experiences either through COVID or the adjustments that have been made for you that have been very beneficial in the workplace.
I would say that being on the ward that I'm on, the speciality I'm on, working from home is not an option. It's a very hands-on role. With regards to the Equality Act, I recently, over the last couple of years, we have to do like mandatory online e-learning. And I came across the fact that they'd had the disability section. Now, I'd never really noticed about that until I realised that you should have a risk assessment done in the NHS like once a year, and kind of a minimum of once a year if other adjustments need to be made. I would say that since doing my apprenticeship, I needed extra support, and the support came off the back of the access to work. Now, I ended up having to apply for access to work because of the fact that it was an apprenticeship and I wasn't funded through student finance. Therefore, I wasn't entitled to the ESA.
Disabled Students Allowances.
Yes. So access to work was my only way to get the support I needed for me to basically find coping strategies and understand maybe what everybody else was getting in the academic side. What took me maybe a little bit longer to understand and be able to kind of get all of this that's in my head into an assignment, or instead of going off on this tangent and off on that tangent, and then I actually put the vital information that I needed. So that was a kind of a negative as well for me, because to go through the access to work was quite straightforward. As in, you fill in the application, all the details, access to work gives you a call. They then advise that they have to contact your employer, who then need to authorise the assessment to be done in work, go through everyone. So they send an independent, I can't think of the assessor.
Workplace needs assessor. Yep.
And then they come in, they do the assessment. But the issue is, the next step is your employer has to make the payment if awarded this amount, and then basically your employer then goes to access to work and claims the money back. I had quite a negative time during that. It took me several attempts, and at one point I think my claim was closed because there was no response from somebody within my trust. Luckily at the time I was a member of the unison and then kind of knew my rights and felt like I was kind of being a bit ignored and, if you will, discriminated against, because something that was so essential to me and just for me to be able to continue with my degree was being stopped by someone not basically just taking ownership and saying, look, yeah, that's fine, we'll authorize that and then we'll do the. But in the end I was successful, but it was nearly a year into my course, a 2-year course, so it's kind of juggling both sides.
Right, so to summarise, and tell me if I get this wrong, to summarise, the actual access to work process was very straightforward and speedy.
Yes.
You got access to work because you're on the apprenticeship pathway, right. And I think that's really important for people to know that that is a route of support. You didn't qualify for disabled students allowances because it wasn't an academic course, although I expect you're probably qualifying for disabled students allowances now that you're on the nursing course.
Yes, I am, yeah.
So access to work provides equipment such as a laptop, software like mind mapping software, or software that reads to you, or software that writes for you. And also human support, which is where we met. So I am your access to work support coach, and yes, it's got a great big long name as well, workplace strategies, etc. So that means we can work one-to-one via a video platform and look at some of the things that you were talking about. I don't quite get this, or how can I make this paperwork easier, or what can I do to make that strategy less draining for me? And therefore you can work more effectively and efficiently, so you're doing more with less time and less energy. So that's what access to work enables, so you're not disadvantaged at work. So that's really important for people to know, because all human support is reclaimable through access to work. So it's at nil cost or just admin cost to the trust. And I think sometimes maybe the discrepancy is that the trusts see this amount of money and they go, oh my gosh, that's an awful lot of money. But I would then reframe, and I know we've had this conversation with you, so if I'm speaking out of turn, please let me, is that actually most of it is reclaimable.
Yes. In my situation that happened, it was a case of, I think access to work provided like 99% of the claim, and my trust only had the smallest amount ever. And I think they just needed to get a few items for work. So there was a screen, just to make the colours of the screen not kind of everywhere. That's all they had to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of work to be done on access to work. However, what we're trying to do by this podcast is to raise awareness that actually it's a straightforward process. Most people have issues with the trust side of it, either purchasing order or finance or agreeing it. Like you said, they closed your case. And actually, most of the cost is reclaimable. So putting a receipt in or saying it's happened and then getting the money back. So that's answered our question 4, which was, what has your experiences of how initiatives like access to work can help put reasonable adjustments in place to ensure you're not disadvantaged at work? So your reasonable adjustments was having a little bit more time, having some coaching with myself, having the coloured overlay, having an extra screen so you can see that information in one place and not have to close documents and open them again and lose your train of thought and get distracted, which everybody does to a certain extent, but it's more significant and statistically significant for people who have neurodiverse profile. So we've gone all over the place, which I love. I'm sorry if the listeners have to have kept up, but actually it gives you kind of an insight of who we are and how we work.
Yeah, welcome to our brains.
Yeah, welcome to our brains. Absolutely. I have this thing sometimes, I just wish I could take my brain up, wash it in washing up liquid and put it back in again. Oh yeah, that's absolutely great. But that, as you've said, has many benefits and very positives. Just look at your determination and your commitment, which again is a very common characteristic of people who have a neurodiverse profile. You know, you've gone from level 2 in a year and a half, you could be a band 5 nurse. A different route, but equally as valid. And learning the academic skills in the way, and that's a very common thing as well. I dropped out of A levels, I did an open university degree, and then a mishmash of qualifications to get where I am now. And that's often a common thing. And so, and I think that's a benefit. It can only be a benefit to the diversity.
Definitely.
The NHS staff.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
Ta-ra!
Bye.